Robert Reich points this out, and I want to share it to you. Share it with you. He writes this, Reich does, in his column. Early on in his civil trial for fraud, that's the one that Engoron is presiding over. Early on in his civil trial for fraud, Trump understood that a way to harass Judge Engoron and attack his integrity was to go after his law clerk, Allison Greenfield, who Trump described as Trump-hating. Trump even made up a story that Greenfield was dating Senator Chuck Schumer. And he shared Greenfield's Instagram details on Truth Social, effectively ushering a scourge of far-right scum onto her social media accounts. My God, I mean, and we have no way of preventing this. Trump knows that he has millions, literally millions of brain-dead scum out here in the American public. Filth. Just total ignorant bastards that have no life whatsoever except insofar as it's centered on Trump's maggot hatred and attempt to destroy this country. And Trump knows that. And he also knows that when he, the filthy bastard, publishes somebody's personal information on his toy social media account, that immediately hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people will rally to this bullshit and go after whoever it is that Trump sets up as a target. This is Hitler. This is, oh, Jesus Christ. When Trump's attorney continued to attack Ms. Greenfield, the judge's law clerk, Engoron said this, quote, "It's a shame you've descended to this level," end quote. And then he issued a limited gag order barring Trump or his scum, filthy, degenerate attorneys from speaking about the judge's law clerk. And in issuing that very narrow gag order, Judge Engoron cited, quote, "repeated inappropriate remarks about court staff and the hundreds of threats that the court has received since the trial began, falsely accusing his principal law clerk of bias against them and of improperly influencing the ongoing bench trial," end quote. This is what the judge said. And then, according to Robert Reich, he added this, quote, the judge did, "The threat of and actual violence resulting from heated political rhetoric is well documented. Since the commencement of this bench trial, my chambers have been inundated with hundreds of harassing and threatening phone calls, voicemails, emails, letter, and packages," end quote. This is what Trump is capable of doing, because Trump figured on that there are millions of people in this country who are so fucking sick in the head, who are so self-hating. They hate their families. They hate their children if they have any. They hate their spouses. They hate themselves. They hate their religion. They hate everything. And they have no place to put the hate except to do drugs, whether it's fentanyl or some kind of speed, or drink themselves into oblivion until a thudding, sickening, galumphing beast rises up and attracts them. And that's Donald Trump. What strange beast is on its way to Bethlehem to be born? Please. He's already here. Now, the judge's extremely narrow gag order against Trump and his fucked up lawyers, it doesn't bar this crazy bitch Stefanik or any other Trump ally in Congress from lying, making incendiary charges, trying to stir up these scum to get them to attack even further against this proceeding. Stefanik's Friday complaint that she filed, trying to get this judge kicked off the case, actually. It came from a Breitbart story. Remember this filthy pigsty Breitbart, who's now dead. Thank God that fucker is dead. But his filth goes on at the Breitbart website. There's a story there alleging that Judge Engoron's law clerk made contributions to individual candidates, political contributions, to local Democratic clubs, and the New York County Democrats. Oh, well, Jesus fucking Christ. Well, that's reason enough right there to condemn the judge. Because his law clerk, who probably has a life when she's not sitting in the courtroom listening to filth and scum like Donald Trump Jr. testify, she has a life. And if she wants to be a Democrat, okay. Stefanik's letter that she wrote condemning this judge discusses the law clerk, Greenfield, at length. And the letter details her so-called her purported political donations to Democratic donors and causes. And then Stefanik, being the misguided Nazi woman that she is, she criticizes the gag order that the judge issued. You know, men who are Nazis are scary enough and vicious enough. But the women, think of the bitch of Buchenwald, so-called. The women prison guards in the death camps who would, I don't know, maybe they got some kind of a sexual thrill out of watching people being burned alive or gassed. But Stefanik represents that. She is throwing her wholehearted support behind Donald Trump, who has made it very clear that if he's not a reincarnation of Adolf Hitler, he is the closest goddamn thing you can come to a reincarnation of Adolf Hitler. And Stefanik is supporting him, worshiping him, doing what he tells her to do. Now, Robert Reich, being Robert Reich, he reaches back into history a little bit. And let me share with you what he wrote in his column today. Quote, "This whole shameful strategy of attempted character assassination and intimidation reminds me of something that occurred almost 70 years ago when Senator Joe McCarthy went after Joseph Welch's young staff attorney during the Army McCarthy hearings in June 1954. Joseph Welch was a private attorney representing the Army. McCarthy claimed Welch's staff attorney was a communist, a charge that was likely to end the young man's career. I imagine Mr. Welch felt as protective toward his staff attorneys as Judge Engoron feels toward his law clerk. During the televised hearings, as McCarthy continued his attack on Welch's staff attorney, Welch broke in and said, quote, "Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness," end quote. And when Senator Joe McCarthy didn't let up on his attack, Welch raised his voice and demanded that McCarthy listen to him. Welch said, quote, "Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You have done enough. Have you no sense of decency?" End quote. Now, to add kind of a personal note to it, I remember my mother watching the Army McCarthy hearings back in 1954. I remember it's as clear a memory as any I have. And I don't know why. But I remember my mother standing in our little kitchen, ironing, and down our little living room, at the end of the living room, was a little Philco 10-inch or 12-inch black and white television. And my mother would be ironing my dad's shirts and watching this hearing. Now, again, why that stuck in my mind, I don't know. The only thing I can think of, since my mother was Italian, very much Italian, she was probably screaming and ranting and raving the way I do because of what she was witnessing on the television. And trust me, my mother was a 110% full-blown Roosevelt Democrat. There was no question about her political sympathies, her political position on just about every issue, if not every single issue. But anyway, getting back to what Joseph Welch said, that did it. Almost overnight, McCarthy imploded. And eventually, didn't he die an alcoholic bum, or didn't he commit suicide or die of a heart attack? I guess he didn't commit suicide. Anyway, McCarthy's popularity evaporated, and 3 years later, he was censured by his Senate colleagues. He was ostracized by his party, ignored by the press, and drank himself to death. A broken man at the age of 48. 48! Just a total slob fucking alcoholic who decided, well, I think I'll just drink myself to death. But these are the kinds of people that Trump has associated with and has gathered around him like goddamn vultures and cannibals and ghouls, led by Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller. Man. So it's safe to say, is it not, that Trump and his filthy attorneys and Elise Stefanik and the rest of these filth, they also have no sense of decency. They don't care about the emotional injuries they're inflicting on Miss Greenfield and Gorin's law clerk. And they're doing it for no reason other than to harass the judge and to fuck with his staff, to make them become afraid, and to try to raise questions in the public's mind. And this is where the press has failed us miserably, to raise questions about the judge's impartiality. And by the way, I might add, because Robert Reich mentions this, during the Army McCarthy hearings, McCarthy, that Nazi son of a bitch, his chief counsel was Roy Cohn. And if you remember, Trump compared Roy Cohn to, quote, all the hundreds of respectable guys who make careers out of boasting of their integrity. What I like most about Roy Cohn was when I would have asked him to, he would have done just the opposite. Right. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.